The new iPad announced 50 megabyte downloads, iOS 5.1 released, iTunes in the cloud for movies, iOS iWork updated, iOS for iLife updated, iPhoto for iOS released, and a low-cost iPad 2. It's Thursday, March 8th, 2012, and this is iWake. I'm Tim Chatton, and this is what's going on in the Apple world today. Before we begin today's episode, I want to just remind everyone that youtube.com/tchatton now features video versions of this podcast, so check it out. Now, onto the show. Apple just wrapped up their special event. Tim Cook and Phil Schiller took center stage to announce the next generation iPad and Apple TV, as well as a few new apps. So what was really announced? Well, the iPad now includes a Retina display, an A5X processor, voice dictation, and a new back camera, similar to the iPhone 4. This back camera is being dubbed the iSight camera. The iPad also has an option for LTE. So the Retina display, it's a major improvement to the old screen found on the iPad 1 and 2. The new display features 1 million more pixels than that of a 1080p display. The quality of this new display is almost unfathomable. The A5X found in the new iPad includes quad-core graphics and the same dual-core CPU. What does this mean for the average user? It's that the games you'll play will be even faster and better than the new iPad. The A5X is needed to power this Retina display and maintain the same fluidity found in the iPad 2. The new iPad did not get Siri. It did get voice dictation. The keyboard includes a microphone button that lets you dictate to your keyboard. Another big change to this iPad is the camera. The iPad finally has a camera that you'll want to use, rather than be ashamed of. It is a 5-megapixel camera with advanced optics that enable the camera to perform great in a wide variety of different situations. The camera is also capable of recording 1080p video. The iPad also includes video stabilization, so your videos won't be shaky. The name is a bit weird. The iSight is back. My thought here is you basically have the FaceTime camera for what you see with the face, and the iSight camera is what you see through the vision of your iDevice. Kind of simple, but kind of makes sense bringing the iSight name back after killing it off a few years ago for this back camera, and I imagine the next iPhone would make this name change as well. The final big change here with the iPad is inclusion of LTE in the data-equipped model for the iPad. LTE, for those that don't know, is the next generation of mobile data. It has the potential for speeds that many landlines in your homes cannot even deliver. The new iPad can also be turned into a Wi-Fi hotspot that can be shared out to your Wi-Fi-enabled devices. There's no official word yet from Verizon or AT&T if this feature will be supported. What LTE means for most people here is faster data, but more costly data. AT&T will most likely not let customers migrate their limited data plans to this new iPad, and you'll be forced to use a 2 gigabyte $30 a month account rather than unlimited for $30. Just like prior generations of iPads, you will be able to sign up and cancel at any time. Pricing for these new plans is as follows. AT&T has the following: at 250 megabytes, you pay $15, 2 gigabytes, $30, and 5 gigabytes, $50, with the typical $10 per gig up from there on the 2 and 5 plans. Verizon is a bit different, starting at starting at $30 for 2 gigs, 5 gigabytes for $50, and 10 gigs for $80. Apple also unveiled a lower-cost iPad 2 at this event. The iPad 2 can now be had for $399. This low-cost iPad includes 16 gigabytes of storage and Wi-Fi connectivity. The 3G model with 16 gigabytes of storage is available for $529. The refurbished iPad 2 did get a price raise today from $349 from $299. So the refurbed iPad actually went up in price rather than down. I'm happy with this $399 price point, but was hoping for a lower cost, perhaps $349 price point, to truly kill the competition. The iPad will be available at the same price points. That is, the new iPad will be available at the same price points with the release date of March 16th. No word yet on a time of that, but I would imagine a 5 p.m. launch time, though that has not been clarified as of yet. Pre-ordering is now available from Apple's website at store.apple.com. The new iPad is simply, as I've kind of hinted at, is simply called the new iPad. It is not an iPad 3 or an iPad HD, but rather it is a new iPad. And basically, this is a great move. It's showing that this is not just a consumer electronic device, but rather this is going to be a computer. Just like the Mac, there is no number. You get the MacBook Air, you get the MacBook Pro. It is what it is. This is a transition year for Apple. And next year, we won't have an iPad 2 with a new iPad. We'll just have an old one and a newer one. We'll have different specs, and that'll work out. Before moving on, there are a few unmentioned things I wanted to mention. Bluetooth 4.0 is included in this iPad. Because of the Retina display, Apple also decided to increase basically the downloads from on 3G from 20 megabit up to 50 megabit downloads. This is a huge win for app makers and podcasters like myself and podcast listeners like yourself. Apple Care is a plus, but it's priced at just $99, and this includes accidental damage support, which I'm not sure if it's worth this, because for each instance of the accidental damage, you'll be paying a hefty fine for that. So before leaving the iPad hardware, I just wanted to share some hands-on impressions from those that were actually in San Francisco for this event. Slash here made reference that this, is revolutionary, as Apple says, and they have to agree. They just had their hands on with the new Retina display and iOS 5.1, and the difference from the iPad 2, which remember stays on the sale alongside it, is vast. There's a big difference here in the display. The pixels in this new display are at arm's length, completely indistinguishable to them. It's only when you get up and close that you can really make this difference out. So this is, when you're up close reading books, things like that, you'll notice a big difference. The Verge goes on by saying, physically, this device is pretty much the same as the previous model. It's a little bit thicker, they could feel, but really unnoticeable unless you're really looking for it. Since the design hasn't dramatically changed, there's not much to note as far as the casing department, and though there's improved cameras, the general seating and size of these sensors seem to be the same. And finally, Engadget closes by saying there's no doubt here that this tablet feels like a $500 product, oozing quality from edge to edge and being as delightful as ever to use. Is it the second coming of the tablet? No, it's not. But if we've learned anything from the iPhone 4S, it doesn't have to be successful. Apple just put an insane amount of real estate in the hands of crafty developers, and frankly, we can't wait to see what they develop for it. So those were the thoughts of those that actually had their hands on it. Everyone else will have to wait till March 16th to get theirs. Meanwhile, iOS 5.1 was also released and includes a bunch of nifty features. First up, and this was actually talked about on stage from Tim Cook, is Japanese support for Siri, and it's pretty cool to see in action. And not much more to say here, except it's pretty awesome to see that come, and I'd hope to see China support come, as that's a huge market for Apple. And other iOS 5.1 features is Photos, which can now be deleted from the photo stream. This was also rolled out for iPhoto on the Mac, so you basically on iPhoto can right-click on the photo stream picture you want to delete and just delete it, and it's gone. A camera and just in general has been improved in a bunch of different ways. First up is the shortcut, which prior to this you had to double-click the home button to get to show up. Now you just slide up from the camera icon, which is always present on the lock screen, and that will pull up the actual camera. The iPad camera was also beefed up in a big way as far as the interface. So instead of having to try to move your hand to the middle bottom of the iPad, you can now just hold it at a normal place, and the new trigger for the camera should now appear right where your thumb is, which is a nice enhancement. Also, for the iTunes Match subscribers out there, they added Genius Mixes and Genius Playlists, so you have that functionality so you don't lose that by choosing to use iTunes Match rather than syncing. Meanwhile, with audio for TV programs and movies, the iPad now includes louder and clearer sound. So these little tiny speakers that our iPad has should hopefully sound a bit better with video on the iPad. Meanwhile, podcast support on the iPad was beefed up a little bit by adding playback speed and 30-second rewind to the music app. It's still lacking in many ways, including enhanced AAC support is simply not there. This is something that's been around in the iPod since around 2003, and it's not on the iPad. So I hope to see them add this in the future. Also, it mentions battery life is improved, but only time will tell if that is actually fixed this time around. Hopefully it is, because it's driving me insane with all the Just using my iPhone these days, it dries up before the day's over. So hopefully they fix that. And then the final bug that got fixed is audio dropping out for outgoing calls, which I've never experienced, but many have that I've seen on the interwebs. And needless to say, this is just a huge update. They can get over the air now. My iPad 2 is stuck in the old OS until a jailbreak comes out, as I simply love tethering it until AT&T starts throttling my usage. The other big announcement today, after just the software stuff out of iOS, was the new Apple TV. And the big noticeable change here that we know about, at least, is 1080p support. There's no word yet until we break this open if there's more SSD storage for cached content, stuff like that. But right now, it's just 1080p support. So hopefully there's other stuff inside that we just don't know about quite yet. The Apple TV comes with a new software update that includes a brand new interface. The interface that they've decided to go with here basically looks like they're going to be gearing towards more apps and more content than previously available, and hopefully we start seeing that in the coming months or even weeks. The update is available for existing customers of the Apple TV 2, and once again, Apple TV 1 is obviously not supported here. Also with this was a cool announcement that was just kind of thrown in there and not really talked about much, but is that's 1080p content coming to the iTunes Store. And it's actually out there now if you want to go browsing around the iTunes Store. And on the Mac, it's a pretty cool thing. You just load up iTunes and the new version, that's 10.6, which got released. And what you're able to do is, in settings, you're able to choose 720p or 1080p as your default download. So if you don't want the huge file sizes on your Mac, you don't need that. You can just choose the smaller ones. But for those that want the big uncompressed, or mostly uncompressed, I should say, versions, you can choose to have the 1080p. And the file sizes, they range, about 4.5 gigabytes is what I saw for 1080p, which is smaller than what you would be getting probably out of a Blu-ray rip, which is cool to see. Apple also announced during this which I'm most excited for, is the ability to re-download past movie purchases and stream those on the Apple TV. This, as I just mentioned, is my favorite announcement of the day. It's iTunes and Cloud for movies. I've been waiting for this since they brought the TV shows, and it's finally here. I personally, over the years, have lost all of my purchases of movies and haven't made very many of them just because I lose the files or my hard drive crashes, and discovered that I have access now to 9 movies that I can re-download at free of charge or stream to the Apple TV. And I'll be probably buying a lot more movies now as I see deals come up in sales in the iTunes Store. So another thing before we leave the Apple TV bit is just Netflix. You're actually able to sign up for Netflix and get it billed through your iTunes account. So if you have a lot of just funds in iTunes, or say this is a cool thing that, say your parent, gives you allowance in iTunes, you could actually, as a kid or whatever, or if you use the allowance to fund your iTunes, use that for Netflix instead of buying stuff through iTunes, which is kind of a cool idea. And meanwhile, just kind of a smaller thing that wasn't really mentioned on stage is the remote app for iOS that controls your Apple TV got updated as well to include integration with iTunes Match. Prior to this, you were able to get iTunes Match on the Apple TV, but you had to do the gesture-based controls rather than browse your entire listing of content right there on the remote app, like you could do with things that were shared to the Apple TV through a Mac to Apple TV. So greatly enhanced support there for iTunes Match. So after they did all the hardware stuff, they had this whole big segment of the show, and it felt kind of weird ending with all these apps, but they ended with a bunch of apps that Apple updated or created new ones. So what they did is they updated their entire iWork suite to include Retina support as well as new charts, transitions, and things like that. iOS 5.1 is need to try this stuff out, so I've not updated my iPad ones to these yet, but it looks like you'll be able to create much more powerful presentations in Keynote and just some really stellar iWork projects. iMovie, and I guess the iMovie and GarageBand received the bigger updates. iMovie now features trailer creation as well as a lot of other little enhancements, better organization of your iMovie projects, and GarageBand got integrated into iMovie. But the bigger deal is with GarageBand, I think. GarageBand got some nifty new features that lets you jam with your friends over Wi-Fi or even Bluetooth if you don't have a Wi-Fi connection. I believe up to 4 different people you can actually jam out with. And I'm curious to see if any bands will be touring the country with GarageBand. I think that would be a fun thing to see. The update also includes a new instrument for GarageBand dubbed Smart Strings, and this is basically cello, violins, all that kind of stuff. It's an orchestra on your iPad or iPhone, and it also includes support for sharing out the Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud. With all that said, the really big announcement today from Apple was iPhoto for iOS. The new $5 app works on the iPad and iPhone. The app features built-in multi-touch editing, brushes for editing photos, professional quality effects, basically just, Instagram, but a lot better. Photo journals, which is a pretty cool thing that a lot of people are saying will replace the whole mobile me photo galleries, and I hope that really comes to fruition where you're able to just have a static URL, you're able to visit all of your photo journals and do that. So hopefully that's the solution. It's not yet out for the Mac, which I think would be a cool thing and almost a necessary thing if they want to replace the mobile media galleries with this. Other little features include things like photo beaming and just being able to browse and organize your photos right there on the iPad. The entire iLife suite is now available for iOS once this is out, and it's out now. So it's pretty nifty to see all 3 apps for iLife come out. And of course, iDVD is a dead product, and iWeb is also a dead product. So those 2 will never see the light of day for iOS or the Mac ever again, I would have to believe. So there you go, Apple. That's what Apple announced. Lots of goodies today. And the best news is, I think, is that the old hardware is capable of doing most of what they announced. The Apple TV can run the new software. That is, the old Apple TV can do that. And the iPad 2 can run the new apps, and is still a great device and being sold today. I have no current plans to upgrade to the new iPad unless I happen to come upon a ton of cash, or if someone's willing to donate one, or if I get a sponsor to give me one. So iPad 2 is still great, and I continue to plan on using it in the future. Before leaving you today, there's 2 more stories of note that I just wanted to mention. First is that Fox and Universal are blocking iTunes in the cloud for movies due to contracts with HBO. My hope is after this contract is up and the renegotiations begin, that they'll play ball and work out a deal that would enable them to do both HBO and iTunes. But if not, just iTunes would be good. And lastly, Apple has released a new free configuration utility for the Mac, which lets educational institutions, individuals, or whoever manage iOS devices. According to Apple, this configuration app can be used by larger organizations and businesses to set up new devices, install enterprise apps, and enroll each device with a mobile device management solution for remote management by an IT administrator. It's going to be perfect for classroom or student lab where devices need to be quickly refreshed and kept up to date with correct settings, approved policies, apps, and data. Apple Configurator can also be used to personalize devices with data and documents for special users. So I've been playing around with this a little bit. I'm pretty impressed, and it sounds like you'll actually be able to, have different profiles for users, and it doesn't matter what device you're on. You can just kind of load it up, but I have to do more digging around and playing with it to see how far it can go with this. So that's it. I'll have some more on what was announced tomorrow, but this should be a nice overview of what Apple talked about on yesterday's keynote, and I'll kind of dig into tomorrow as far as more of the nitty-gritty and little things that I discover over the day doing my research. So that's what's going on in the Apple world today. If you like this show, head on over to iTunes and leave a review. And also, it'd be great if you subscribe to iWake Again over at iWakePodcast.com/again. This show is free of charge to most users, Monday through Friday, and again, lets you wake up to iWake Again every Saturday. I do interviews and discussions about all things Apple. So subscribe over at iWakePodcast.com/again, and join me tomorrow for another edition of iWake. Have a great day.